Hello, everyone, and welcome to our final summer food webinar, the spring series, number 4 in our series here on May 22nd, Mobile Meals and the Summer Food Service Program. I want to thank all of you for coming today. Before I introduce the guest panelists, I want to make sure everyone is clear on how to use the webinar technology. As you can see, there is a window that pops up on your screen with an audio mode that has the call-in information with an audio pin. You can open or hide the side panel. At the bottom, you're able to ask questions. If you do ask questions, we will definitely try to field those as they come in. Also at the end, we're going to have a question and answer session. So if I do happen to miss your questions, we'll definitely look at all of those at the end of the webinar. So feel free, please write in your questions you have. We're going to unmute the line at several times during this webinar so everyone can speak. And if you have trouble connecting, as it says at the bottom, please ask a question. In the question box, you can hang up or redial or contact my colleague John Harris at 865-0255 or his email, pretty easy, jharris@hungerfreevt.org. So if you have any problems, please say something or redial or email John, and he will get you set up as quickly as possible. Once again, thanks for joining us today. We are here with Nancy Lewis of the Vermont Agency of Education. Nancy, can you hear me out there?
Yes.
Great. Nancy Lewis is the Child Nutrition Consultant for the Vermont Agency of Education. My name is Derek Lambert, Child Nutrition Advocate at Hunger Free Vermont, and we are joined by a guest panelist today, Steve Marinelli, Food Service Director of the Milton Town School District. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. Welcome, everybody.
Yeah. So Steve is someone who has had a lot of experience working with mobile meals in the summertime. And first off, mobile meals, what do we mean when we say that? We really just mean moving meals from a central kitchen where meals are being prepared to a summer food site where kids are being served. Some of you out there have already been doing that. Steve, I know you have been doing that. How many years have you been doing that now?
Oh, my Lord. Getting pretty close to 10 years, if not more.
Great.
Yeah.
And Nancy, how common would you say it is that you see people transporting meals from a kitchen to a site?
Very common, and I think we're seeing it more and more as people understand that it's an option, and they can talk to other people and find out how to make it happen. And so, yeah, we've got quite a few. It's an option when they renew online to tell us that they're going to be satelliting meals.
That's great. And so, of course, the primary objective with this entire program and also with the mobile meals model is to provide meals to all children. As we know, the Summer Food Service Program is the least utilized child nutrition program. Transportation or distance between a kitchen and the site can sometimes be a barrier, and developing the capacity to move meals allows us to expand operations, to provide more meals to more children during the summer. For sponsors, that's also interesting because it allows you to increase the revenue. And we know from our past discussions that these programs operate according to scale, and if you can serve more meals, then the program becomes even more sustainable.
Absolutely, and it helps build community partners as well. Once people know you can outreach to them, it really helps build that bridge of community partnership.
That's great, and being able to move meals out from the kitchen, out from one site to other sites really allows you to connect with those different groups. So lots of different objectives. Of course, the primary goal in all of this is to extend the reach of the Summer Food Service Program to more communities, to more children, and to more families. And an important ways to do that, number one is outreach. As we know, one of the most important ways to make a program successful is to make sure people know about it. If people don't know about the program, they can't take advantage of it. And so the USDA has provided many printed materials that are being distributed around the state, getting the word out in school newsletters, in robocalls, in public service announcements, in radio ads, and also in kickoff events are big ways to really to get the word out so that people know that these programs are there. What are some of the most successful ways, kind of on the ground, very, very basic things, and also some of the bigger picture things that have worked for you, Steve?
I think you've hit some advertisement, especially through the schools, advertise on your menus, websites, mailings that are going home to students towards the end of the year, and advertise. I go and make big posters and put them around all the storefronts and such. It's very, very helpful. And I think kickoff events are another great way. We do a carnival every year to kick off our summer food service program, and it really gets people out there, and then they learn where the sites are, and it's been very, very helpful for us.
Right. And, sometimes it can be a big event. Even if it's not such a big event, there are also smaller things that can be folded into a kickoff event. I'd like to remind everyone the Children's Literacy Foundation has a summer readers program. They've encouraged summer meal sites to apply. I know First Book is also an opportunity for to be able to buy books at a very, very low cost to pair with meals and activities. So lots of different ways to bring that in, which folds into the next one of activities. If you can have activities present on site, then it's easier for children and families to make it out, to make it to the site, and to boost attendance. And being able to move meals from one kitchen to other locations makes it easier to connect with organizations like Parks and Recreation, libraries, Boys and Girls Clubs. Really allows you to connect to the activities that are already going on, rather than having to find a way to fund and staff those yourself. And finally, consistency. Consistency in the meal quality and the meal delivery and the communication with site staff really provides a sense of professionalism, leads people to rely on the services that you provide as a summer food provider, and really helps this model become more sustainable.
Yeah, and it's very important, especially when we're talking about delivered meals, is utilize that meeting with site supervisors and areas that you're going to deliver to, and get the material to them early, be clear and concise of your expectations and their expectations, and it really makes a lot smoother transition when you start delivering these meals. What people are to expect, ask the questions. Do they have refrigeration on site? Are they able to hold milk products? Can you deliver breakfast for the next day, the day before, and save on some transportation time? So there are a lot of questions and answers you can work on to make it a really seamless program.
And that's a great transition, Steve, because the first thing we want to talk about is about keeping food safe, because to move meals somewhere, they've really got to stay safe. And one of the first things that we see when we talk with different summer food providers is finding coolers. You need to have the coolers to be able to keep the food, keep the hot food hot, the cold food cold, so either heat packs or coolers. And you mentioned the one delivery a day. As we've worked with sponsors and sites, this is often not something that really is apparent in the early planning. Can you explain what that looks like for you?
A lot of our sites are quite a few miles away from our production kitchen. So we work with our sites to be able to deliver breakfast for the next day of the day of delivery for lunch. So they're on Mondays, they're getting their breakfast for Tuesday delivered with lunch. So it saves you that delivery time to go out there on Tuesday morning. And we do the same if they have refrigeration. We'll deliver Friday. We'll deliver Monday's breakfast on Friday as well. So it works fantastic. And people looking for coolers and such, I just recommend Walmart online. They usually have free shipping right to your schools and such, so it really makes it easy to order up your coolers and have them delivered within a couple days.
And one thing we also encourage, and we've seen from sponsors, is to have information sheets attached to each cooler with the relevant, health guidelines, with advice, reminders on how to serve the meals every day, how to make sure that they're counted correctly, the reporting. So, having these information sheets on each cooler that goes every day is a really good way to maintain program quality and to make sure that everyone who's involved in the program understands what their role is and also how to handle and maintain the foods that are coming in. Nancy, do you have any thoughts on this first part of making sure that the food gets safely from the kitchen to the site?
I think you're right. I think people use a variety of containers. Could be Cambros, depending what the budget is and how far they have to deliver. So it could be even something other than a cooler. But you're right. You've got to keep the temperature and plan maybe your routes. I know for some folks they actually have pretty big routes. So thinking about the timing of when meals are going to be served and how are you going to keep that temperature good? It's possible in your delivery route that it still has to be held at the site for a while, so you might need some additional tools to do that. And it's also, when you talk about putting literature or information on the cooler, if the cooler becomes a central part of the site and serving meals, you might also want to put your non-discrimination poster there too. I know some folks do that, so that's another option.
That's great. We have, in fact, Angelique Franzoni from Wyndham Northeast has written in to say that there were some nice coolers that we bought that fit an entire crate of small milks, 50, and the compact situation helps keep them cool as well. They're right next to each other. And she says Angelique says she found them on Amazon. Yeah, and also she says the digital thermometers are not that much more in cost and work well with off-site locations for times and accuracy. Because that's a good point. That there is a need to temp the meals leaving the kitchen. There's a 4-hour window in which those meals need to be consumed, and the milk, of course, needs to be kept cold. So those are all ideas that Angelique was sharing there that really help take some of the guesswork out of that. It should be something that people have to feel too nervous about, but have those rules, have that protocol in place. And then, of course, properly training and informing all staff. You said your training's coming up on June 3rd, is that
June
right?
3rd, yeah. Yeah.
And so, that's where sponsors get together. They'll bring the site staff together and go over the basic, how are we going to run our program this year? Will there be a meal pickup or a meal delivery? And what some of the ground rules are. And what do you think is the most memorable thing for site staff that attend your training each year?
As in what they should be doing, or I think the most important is the importance of the record keeping. When you're delivering a meal to a site, you're not there handing meals out, so the meal count sheets are very, very important to keep accurate, and food safety, again, is very, very important. So those two, I feel, are the most important of getting the meal counts and keeping the food safe.
Great. And once again, go ahead, Nancy.
It's also occurring to me it might not be a bad idea to create a basic, I'm thinking of it as a standard operating procedure, but a food safety little tip sheet or procedures for the sites to remind people about timing and temping and how to keep food safe and what they should do if they have certain foods for too long, what the approved procedures are for reserving foods, or even about rules about letting kids take a portion of the meal off the site, because there are some allowances around that. So it might not be bad to have something in writing, and those could go with the coolers and stay with the coolers too, just to remind sites about those procedures.
And that's a great idea because, there is the site staff training at the beginning of the summer, but there's absolutely no harm and probably a lot of benefit to just having that information readily available throughout the summer. And the coolers, if you are delivering meals, those coolers are coming in every day. So that's a nice dynamic way to make sure people are getting, the visibility on how are we supposed to handle this stuff when it's coming in. And finally, if meals are no longer edible, there's no, USDA regulations. There is nothing that says it has to be all thrown away. You can compost the food. You can recycle the trays, but just make sure that, it's promptly disposed of. I'm going to unmute the lines at this point to see if we have any questions. I feel like there's a lot of good information there, and I know that we are working with people here who have delivered meals in the past, so I'm going to unmute the line. And if anyone has anything they'd like to say or add to this in the conversation, we can definitely stop here for a moment. Any questions at this point about delivering meals, the coolers, the temperature, and the site staff training? Any questions at all? Also, Angelique just mentioned as well, there is a supervisor guidebook, a site supervisor guidebook that USDA prints. Nancy, I know you've got lots of copies of those as well that you're able to hand out to folks as you're going around. We really definitely encourage people to make sure that every site supervisor has one of those in their hands as well, because it's just a basic handbook that's got a lot of the good, useful information, and it's often, of course, it's produced by the USDA, so you know that it fits the regulations for the federal agency. Nancy, I know that we've seen those in some of the site staff trainings. I know you're giving those out as you go around as well.
Yes, that's right. And USDA did some printing. So now I've got some even half-size little mini ones that I'm going to be giving out to folks. So yeah, they seem to be a popular item. They're just a pocket guide of sorts to remind people about different details. So yeah, it's helpful because even if you go to training, well, I know for me, sometimes if I need a checklist or things in writing just to remind me of what I should be paying attention to every day.
That's a good point. And now that I'm thinking about it, for all of you on this call, I'm going to send out an electronic copy of the Site Supervisor Guide that the USDA puts out. It's Nancy, as you mentioned, does have some really beautifully printed ones. But for those of you who may have seen Nancy recently, or maybe you're not going to touch base for a while, I will send out an electronic version so you can go ahead and print those out for your staff today and have those on call and ready to go. One of the first things that's also helpful at this point in time is to establish the meal delivery and pickup. As Steve mentioned, if you can at all, and especially if your sites are eating more than one meal, go ahead and try to deliver breakfast with lunch. So when you have that lunch delivery, you can have breakfast in that same one. That cuts off one trip back and forth every day. It cuts down on your mileage, cuts down on your cost. And also, there are 3 ways to move meals to sites. One is to have one delivery vehicle and a route. I believe is that how it works for you? You've got one delivery vehicle?
I have one at most times, and sometimes we have to add a second depending on what's going on for the week.
Right. So, often for many folks, there may be just one delivery vehicle that is loaded up with the meals and the coolers and then that drives a predetermined route. Depending on, we see this often when there are 2 or 3 people in the kitchen who are then leaving the central kitchen to the sites. They may break down by sector and deliver to, one may go to one site, one may go to 1 or 2 sites on the way home, and the third person may go a different direction. And then the third option is for sites to pick up their own meals. We definitely see there are situations where it's helpful for sites to pick up their own meals. For example, if you are working in a place and you are already delivering to a more central route, and then there is a site that's coming from much further away, it may make sense to work with them to arrange a pickup. One thing we have found in working with summer food sponsors is that where possible, it is better to deliver if you have that capacity because it gives you a bit more control over that process. I actually think I got that from some of the conversations I had with you, Steve, and some of the other sponsors. Do you feel like that deliver where possible is a good motto?
I think so. I think you see what's going on. You're able to communicate with the site supervisors or camp counselors or whoever might be at those sites, so you are able to address problems as they occur. And hear the positives, menu choices of what's liked, maybe what's not so popular. So it really, you keep your pulse on things. But sometimes it really is beneficial that you get a site that wants meals and you just can't have the capacity to deliver, or it's away from your route, that they're very willing to pick up. And I know of people that are delivering meals to one site, and then they have another site that picks it up from there and moves on further on. So it works very, very well.
Yeah. So the rule there really is to figure out what works best. One of the things to consider if you are on the fence between having people pick up the meals or delivering is it is easier it's actually more difficult to separately reimburse site staff for mileage than to organize reimbursement from one delivery route. So in terms of figuring out if you want to do that sort of thing. And also, a lot of times, especially at libraries and rec clubs and things like that, they may already be strapped for staff. And so getting one person away to come get the meals and bring them back to the children, they may or may not be able to do that. So sometimes it's worth just having a conversation to see, can they afford that one person who's going to be gone for a half hour? Does it make more sense for us to deliver? Nancy, I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are on this. What are some of the things you're seeing?
Yeah, well, what's occurring to me, especially as I look at the slide, is it probably makes a good idea to have some communication mechanism and some checking, because what happens if there's a disconnect between number of meals, let's say. I don't know what Steve what you do for labeling coolers. But if you've got a whole bunch of sites, it's possible maybe a site that needs, 50 meals ends up with 20. There could be something that goes awry in the process. And what do you do? Who do you call? How do you fix that? It might be good to have a communication plan established ahead of time so that you can make sure you've got everything you need to serve the kids at your site that day. And I guess adding that extra element of delivery introduces potential, for something to not be quite right, maybe missing items if you have bag lunches or something like just something to think about, planning for those weird things that might happen. And I don't know, Steve, what you do to stay organized when you have, a truck with many different coolers going to different places on a certain schedule, and you're trying to keep everything together. What happens if a piece of that breaks down?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely correct. What we do is we try to develop a system, and we do a training within our own staff, of how to label coolers, and we go as far as even condiments. We have a condiment list depending on what the meals might be. So we always label each cooler with tape and magic marker. And then when we pack our coolers, another great thought is if you have multiple sites, pack your coolers of what's going to be delivered last, put them in first, and what's coming out first is in the front of your vehicle. So save some time and a lot of effort for your delivery people to be able to hop off, and they know that, okay, here's this site, the cooler's right here, and you just work your way through your vehicle.
That's a good point. And also, Angelique, go ahead, Pat. Go ahead, Nancy.
So I'm just kind of paraphrasing what he said. So it sounds like planning is a key part of this, and walking through, kind of like imagining in your mind what a route might look like, who's going to be at the other end. What do you do if someone isn't where they're supposed to be? What if you get to a site with food and the people that are supposed to be there aren't there? Just kind of walking through what that looks like, feels like, timing, all of that to get the details right. Sounds like planning is an important part of this.
Yeah. And actually, Angelique, again, from Wyndham Northeast, mentioned that, the daily sheets, the daily count sheets also have a comment section down at the very bottom, and she says they really use those to see what are the needs that the sites are communicating. What are the needs that they have? In her training with site staff, she really makes a point of letting sites know that, they're looking for feedback in that comment section. And so thank you for that, Angelique. And also mentioning one of the approaches they have is that for a new site, they will have, typically they will have the site pick up meals the first year so that they can gauge child participation, get a better idea of the numbers, and then moving forward, move toward a delivery. So there are all kinds of different methods here. It sounds like what I hear Nancy and Steve and Angelique saying is that the communication is really the key that prevents some of those breakdowns.
And a lot of times, take advantage of, if you have a site, let's say you're delivering to another school or an area that they can hold, even if it's something like a case of sporks for the summer, or their plates or whatever it might be. If they can store some of that, things that are easily forgotten on a daily basis, that they at the site have a little emergency backup of serving utensils or plates or condiments or whatever it might be. Take advantage of your sites that are able to hold and store these things safely and securely.
That's great, because then for those small oversights, it doesn't become a big problem. That's a good point. And speaking of small oversights and then just changes that come, let's think about planning for some of the changes. We know that changes in attendance, that's a reality in the summer, right, Steve? There are always changes. And that can be for different reasons. Sometimes it's because there's a group that's there for a shorter period of time. Sometimes there's a field trip. And for some of the pool sites, some days it's just raining, right? What are some of the biggest differences that you've seen?
I think rain is probably one of the biggest culprits for change. And weather, 4th of July week, vacation weeks. So you really learn patterns. And I always stress that they request their meals on their return sheets for the next day, and a morning call if there are going to be more changes. And so I always encourage sites to call up till 9 o'clock, 9:30 if they're going to have some major changes during that course of that day.
Yeah, that's what we've seen as well. And you know, going around talking with sponsors around the state and site staff, realize that, you know, it's not that it has to be a phone call or it needs to be a text or an email, but deciding on how are we going to communicate day to day, and then just sticking to that, right? Trying to make sure that you've got a fixed, you know, a good way to communicate throughout the summer.
And you made a great point now with, you know, texting is really, you know, so you're in the middle of your production or putting things together. It's quick and it's very easy to respond. So I like texting.
That's great. So, you know, like you said, as Steve was saying, in the comment section of the claims reimbursement forms, also, you know, in the phone calls, the text messages, or the emails the following morning, it's good that, you know, if you are a sponsor, communicate to your site staff up until which time they can still let you know those changes, and you can take those into account. Because you may be in a situation where, you know, if they can get to you by 8 or by 8:30 or by 9, you can still put some of that food back into storage. You can keep it in the refrigerator and cut down on your waste. And if site staff know what that cutoff time is, then they can work with you to cut down on waste. Nancy, is that something that you've seen as well, that sponsors are connecting with site staff to let them know what their time frame is?
Yes, and what's also occurring to me is, and I wonder how Steve's worked with this, is there a certain amount of change or something that you see that triggers that maybe you need to do some more training or visiting to that site? Because then there is a potential for that disconnect, and, you know, when you're communicating a little more remotely with paper or emails, you might be missing something or, you know, not noticing something you in the central kitchen might notice that the site might not know. So I wonder if there are certain things that you watch for that then later you say, well, I really want to make sure I meet, you know, go out and visit the sites, you know, in a certain frequency, or if there's a certain trigger that says, oh, it's time to go, you know, just hang out with them a little bit and see how it's going.
Absolutely correct there. It's, you know, it really becomes patterns, and when that pattern is broken, and that's where the site visits, you have one within correct me here, the first week, and then within the first 4 weeks. So those visits are very important because you have that communication of what's going on, and, you know, you can tweak the program to make it really work for, you know, the site. You know, it's not one size fits all. That each site is just a little bit different. So those visits are really important. And like you said, watch the counts and watch your meals coming back. If you're getting a lot of meals coming back and they keep ordering the same and the same, then it's a flag. I think we just got an email saying that, you know, it's a good time to really go and take a visit.
Yeah, that's what Angelique was saying here, echoing some of what you're saying, Steve. If you're getting a lot of meals coming back, if you're noticing on the forums you've got a lot of unused meals, and if at the same time you're not hearing anything back from that site other than their daily call-in, if they're not specifying anything, maybe it's a good time to check in and just, you know, either drop in or give them a call and say, you know, this is what I'm seeing, and can you help me understand that? Are there any changes we need to be making? That sounds like a great thing, you know, and like you said, the monitoring visits are definitely a big part of that as well. That first week especially is really when you're figuring out a lot of things, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely the changes in attendance we find, and Steve, hearing you speak, and Nancy, you know, that is definitely a big challenge to manage, but there are definitely, you know, communication, again, is really the best way to make that process more reliable. Also, you know, when there are field trips that come up, you know, asking sites to indicate that to you in advance so that you can know, you know, are we expecting the same amount of students? Sometimes field trips may bring more or less. What kind of meals do you need? Because we know that sometimes, you know, the summer food sponsor has a hot meal planned on a day that may or may not work on a field trip. And then also, you know, just there are certain things that, as a sponsor, you need to be able to say about a field trip, people being gone for the day. Are there any big requirements that you have for summer food sites? Do you tend to send them cold meals on field trip days, or do you send hot
cold meals? Yeah, cold meals, because they usually are traveling some point.
Mm-hmm.
What I find a lot with my sites is depending where they're going, I have some sites that have storage facilities that they'll take lunch for the next day delivered because they're getting on a bus and going somewhere at 8 o'clock in the morning, or I'll meet them at 8 o'clock in the morning, or you know, and there again, that's a great time to talk about that during your visits and your pre-summer meal program meeting, is because most summer sites have their field trips already planned for the summer, so you can get it right on your calendar right before you even start, so you can plan menu planning and such, that you know what meal qualities to use, and you know, it makes a big difference. You know, you got to pack a totally different lunch for a field trip at sometimes than a normal lunch during the week.
And that's why here on the screen we can see, you know, we encourage sponsors, if possible, and as much as possible, to try to map your summer meal program and ask site staff. You know, you can ask them to give you all of that relevant information on their summer plan, so that you can plan on, you know, what meals are we going to prepare, what kind of delivery, you know, do I need to make an early delivery this day? Are they going to be around the next morning? Are they going to be somewhere? So just mapping your summer meal program, asking site staff to be clear with you about their plans is really a good way to take some of the guesswork out of that. I feel like these changes in attendance and some of these questions are some of the biggest ones that come up. So I'm going to, again, unmute the lines. And Nancy, I'm going to ask for some of your thoughts. And then just so you know, everyone, I'm unmuting the lines. And if we have any questions about this section of the presentation, feel free to go ahead and speak up, because this is, I think, something that definitely sponsors deal with also.
So Nancy here, wanting to remind people that if you do have field trips, to fill out a field trip request form. The way the USDA views a state agency relationship to the different sponsors and sites is that we're approving where your meals are served, the times of your meals, you know, your capacity, all of that. When you go on a field trip, you're actually changing the location of where meals are served, and it may, and I've never not approved a field trip, but it lets me know that the site is going to be operating with a different number of kids. Maybe if the whole site's going away that day, we, as a state agency, wouldn't want to come out and try to do a site visit that day. So we do have a form on our website. I typically tell people to get to our summer food website under the Vermont Agency of Education larger website, Child Nutrition Programs. I just say Summer Food Vermont, and it ends up being the first link that comes up in my Google search. But we do have a web page there with all the different forms that are used during the summer, meal count sheets. If you run out of those, there are links there, links to those USDA manuals, including the site supervisor guide, all kinds of stuff there that you might find useful. And there is a request for field trip approval. So there's a form there that you can use. You can put all your field trips on one form if you want. You don't have to do a separate form for every field trip.
That's great, Nancy. Thanks for that information. Do we have any questions at this point about the changes in attendance and ways to manage those challenges in the summer? Any questions on here so far at this point? All right.
Got a shy group out
there. Got a shy group, I know. You know what? I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but let's see. Is there anyone here that would want to share from their experience? Anyone here that would want to share? I know what I see a lot of times when we're talking about the changes in attendance is there can be in that first week a lot of uncertainty about what the numbers are going to be. But then, you know, finally, often what we find is that, you know, 1 or 2 weeks in, people really have a much clearer idea of what to expect. And even if there is a rainy day, people have already kind of seen that once or twice, and they know how to adjust. So that's something we've often seen, is that people are very concerned about that, and rightly so. But that often, you know, the experience of running the meal program, even for just a short period of time, a number of days or a couple of weeks, people tend to have a much better idea of what to expect.
It becomes very seamless very quickly if you keep that line of communication open, it really becomes a very seamless process. And even when you're juggling, 3, 4, 10, 15 sites, it really becomes like a well-oiled machine.
Great. I got a couple of questions that have come in. What happens when it rains? What happens if it's an outdoor site, the pool, for example? What happens when it rains? I know you had a pool site for some time.
We still provided meals, but there again, it's very consistent. You'll have some kids that'll show up regardless of what the weather is at the pool. It's their place to go, like whether it's their where their family requires them to go or whatever. But you learn that or that the pool might have a big event, so they communicate, and that's a great place to do an event as well as your pool sites. So it becomes very consistent.
Okay. And I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but she did ask a good question. If you are at one of those sites, like a pool that kind of is fair weather friendly, and then you had a rainy day or, let's say, inclement weather, what would you expect, just on an estimate, what would you expect the percentage to be of attendance? What would be the drop from a sunny day to a poor weather day?
Oh, probably 80%.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you knew that going in, and then if there were any specific changes, then they would communicate those to you. Okay, great.
And Nancy wants to remind people that it is a requirement that the site has a plan for bad weather so that they can continue to serve. So maybe it means moving to a different location in the park or wherever it is that has a covered table or something like that. So when we do our agreements, it is something that needs to be planned for so that when you're, especially with open sites, you're advertising to families that food is available and you need to provide it regardless of the weather. So that's something that we're looking for. And people have done different creative things with, their own tarps and ways of, utilizing structures that are around to create coverings on bad days. But it certainly makes sense to me what you're saying, that kids just don't come regardless of whether the cover was provided for them or not. They're just not going to head to the pool on that rainy day.
And what we're seeing here from Angelique is that something that made a big difference for them, she was saying there was a big difference between sites that basically like a pool where there were no other planned activities, the big drop. She was saying that she saw a much smaller drop in sites that were outdoors but that also had planned activities on rainy days. Mm-hmm. So if you're working with a site that actually has alternate activities that are planned, she was saying she saw about a 10 or a 20% drop. So knowing, what's happening at the site in the event of bad weather can also be a big help.
That's a good point. I have a couple camps that they're outdoors. They do have like a gazebo or something of that nature, but when it's very stormy weather with thunder and lightning, they move to a school that is nearby. So there again, you have to have that communication level. You're traveling with your meals, getting ready to deliver to that site, and all of a sudden you get some lightning and thunder. You got to be able to have that line of communication to know where those meals have to be dropped for that day and such. So even sites that are outdoors with cover, some tend to have a backup plan, especially on thunder and lightning days.
That's great. And so knowing where they go and knowing what they have planned can also help you estimate how many they might. Okay, that's great. Thanks, Angelique, for that as well. That brings up just a different level of complexity. And so also we'll move on now to the thinking about ways to strengthen your finances. Thinking about the fact that mobile meals create a unique opportunity to have meals served in meals prepared in one central location and then sent out to many sites, which helps you manage the labor costs because you have one central kitchen that's preparing meals for many different sites rather than trying to produce those foods separately. So combining the fact that there can be a lower labor cost for multiple sites with one kitchen and the higher reimbursement, there are some opportunities in summer food. Obviously, transportation is a recurring challenge, but by thinking about how you can adapt your mobile meals model, there can be some advantages that can come out of that. One of those is the scale of the sponsors who are able to adopt numerous sites. Steve, maybe can you talk about that as you've seen your program grow at the different places you've worked? You know, how are mobile meals an advantage to your program?
Well, having the ability to transport meals, you know, the only way you really are going to be sustainable in the summer food service program is in volume of business. And Derek said if you had a production kitchen at one site, you really can control not only your cost but the quality of the product you're producing. So I always solicit for more sites. More volume is good business for me because I can be more viable, and it also provides more job opportunities for staffing in my kitchen, whether it's high school students or regular school staff. So I think it's great for all economies all around that when you're able to hire people to work. It helps. There again, it benefits the whole community.
And that's a good point. That, you know, working out of one kitchen isn't just about the cost; it's also about the program quality. It allows you to be close to what's happening, the foods that are being chosen, and the meals that are being prepared. That's a great point that you bring up. And then also maximizing each delivery. It sounds like, you know, you really give a lot of thought to where you're going along those routes, and that cuts down on cost as well. I'm guessing you're able to decide, can I do this with one vehicle? How much time do I need to be on the road? How many miles am I driving? So those are all great ideas. Thanks so much for that, Steve. Nancy, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, my additional thoughts is it's interesting to me the potential for creativity and how different people might piece things together, because I can imagine you might go as far as partially transporting to a location and then have another leg that might be picked up by volunteers or whatever, that you might have some limitations on your end, but they're met by a partnering organization that picks up on the other end. And there might even be a third leg where there's another option, busing or something that gets the kids to the site. So it doesn't have to be one, you know, organization doing everything. You can piece together solutions and try to leverage volunteers to get the meals out to where the kids are. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're really trying to serve the most kids as possible. And we know in Vermont there's just a lot of challenges with connecting kids where they are in the summertime, what they have for transportation options to the meals. So you can kind of be open and creative and think about how to make that happen, and who are your partners, and who do you want to know about what you're doing so that they can offer help or you know, potentially be a partner with you.
That's a great point, and that reminds me of Lonnie Page down in Wyndham Southwest, who a couple of years ago was partnering with the Rotary Club. It was picking up meals from his kitchen, taking it out to the sites, and it worked beautifully. So you're exactly right, Nancy. I mean, depending on the community, depending on what's available, those partnerships can really play into the success of the program. Definitely. And you know, and it goes back as well. You know, one of the things about the mobile meals is being able to boost the number of sites that you can serve meals at, and then, you know, once again, going back out, looking beyond the kitchen and looking beyond the delivery piece of it to the outreach, boosting attendance at those sites really allows this entire process to be sustainable. You know, as the program grows, the meals that are being prepared, you getting, you know, working with your sites to make sure that you're delivering the number of meals that they need, making sure you're working closely with them to do outreach. We find, once again, the connection between sponsors and sites to do effective outreach. In the schools, of course, the schools are the primary outlet for that sort of thing, but also in town newsletters, public service announcements, you know, local papers. That's great. And, you know, not being afraid, you know, making that step to be willing to expand service in these different communities, to look around and to see which communities could benefit from these programs that currently aren't. And then, you know, being consistent in serving those. We find that's, you know, the sponsors who are willing to take those steps are often able to see that they have successful programs and they're able to locate partners to work with, which has been great. It's been really exciting to hear those stories.
Yeah, that both of you guys, that's such a great point. Is find out who your partners in your community are, because there's a lot of people out there, whether they're retirees, Rotary, your boosters, your PTAs. There are a lot of organizations out there that want to help. Churches are another group that are willing to help and provide some of this service. And it also helps expand the word to, if there is an area that has a need for meals, that they might approach you, and it helps grow your program.
That's great. You know, we're going to go ahead and open this up to folks. I'm sending out a question. What do you anticipate to be your biggest challenge with mobile meals this year? And just ask folks either to write in or to speak up and to let us know what are some of the challenges that you're anticipating in summer meals this year. And let's just have a conversation about some of those things. So I sent that question out there. Feel free to respond either in written form or by phone. We'd just love to hear what some of you have to say about your challenges for the year to come. These may be challenges that you've known for some time. They may have been the product of a conversation you've had this week or something that you're anticipating. But what are some of the challenges that you are seeing as you're moving forward with planning for this year's program? Any thoughts out there? Nancy, what are some of the challenges that you're hearing as you're going around the state, helping give folks ideas and support them in their work with the summer food program?
Well, I think it's resources and people, trying to pay staff and wanting and knowing that activities are important, but then knowing also, you need to plan for that and have adult supervision, and do you have a budget that's going to support that? So I think it's we've got a lot of budgetary challenges that people are trying to work with and be creative with. So it's always good to think about how can you how can you reach more kids with fewer resources. That's what we're all challenged with. And I think the more people that know about what you're doing, about this funding, about the opportunity that you can serve more meals and there's more money coming from the USDA, the more you might, I don't want to say convert, but the more people who understand what this is about, they may take on the challenge. People who know that there are kids come to realize that right in their community there are kids who really need these meals in the summer. They rely on these meals during the school year. Painting a picture for them, telling stories about kids, letting people know what we're doing, what this is all about. There are lots of people who just have no idea either about the need or about what we're doing to meet the need. And so the more people that you talk to, the more chances there are that there might be somebody else who has something and wants to offer something or even has an idea in your community, because all the communities are different. There are different opportunities that, here I sit in a state agency, I wouldn't know because I don't live and travel and work in that community. So it's really, I think it's really being, you want to keep your mind open to possibilities and the possibilities that other partners might bring. You can't think of everything all by yourself, and you want to engage and energize other people and motivate them to think up some ideas and be helpful to the cause.
That's a great idea, Nancy, and that's something we would like to encourage folks is, to kind of record some of those stories, to record some of those quotes, record some of those interactions, either written or audio. Those are great tools for promoting your programs. They're great tools for securing partnerships, either through local businesses or organizations, other nonprofits. People really respond well to those stories, don't they?
Absolutely. And talk to your school districts, whether you're a school providing the meals or whether you're independent source doing summer meals. Communicate with your schools, communicate with your administrators, and explain the importance of this program and the dependency on these meals. I'm already seeing the anxiety level of some students that really hate to see the end of school come because it's like their security blanket, and food is a very big part of that. So it really calms a lot of people knowing that they will be able to at least get a couple decent meals each day for their children, and the children know that there's opportunities for them to go somewhere safe, have a good meal, and have some activity as well.
That's great. And being able to translate that kind of story, that kind of narrative, from the sponsor perspective, from the site perspective, from the child and the family's perspective, can really be helpful in communicating and kind of rolling that into a request for volunteers, rolling it into a request for support of different kinds. Kira was saying here that her biggest challenge, finding volunteers, and then also the excess meals, which of course, as we mentioned, is a big, ongoing challenge of communication. But definitely, the volunteers, being able to translate, being able to share the stories of people in the community is a great way to galvanize interest in the program. Let's see, Jack Carroll down in Chester, Andover, is to serve off-site meals. It's a question, in fact. To serve off-site meals, is there anything we need to do on our application or agreement? So I think this is maybe a reference to a field trip. Nancy, just to reiterate, the field trip, if there's going to be a meal served off-site, they just need to let you know about that ahead of time?
Yep. There's a field trip request form, and it just lets me know. You kind of fill in the blanks on the form, and it lets me know that meals are going to be served off-site that day, and so that I can do my part, which is to make sure that I'm giving my stamp of approval to that. That's a requirement. That's my job from the USDA's and the state agency, which is me, is supposed to be doing that, is approving where the meals are served and making sure the pieces are in place. So sometimes when people ask about field trips, I just ask them, what provisions do you have in place around temperatures, making sure all the components, to make a full meal are available to the kids. If it's an open site, then is someone staying back at the main site in case drop-in people still show up? So there are a few questions sometimes that I ask about that. Sometimes field trips are just a subset of, a certain program or something that's a subset of the site that's going off. So, so there is a form on our Agency of Education summer food web page for you to complete and send in to me, to Nancy Lewis.
And that's right there on the Agency of Education website. Yeah. So, for meals that are just going to be occasionally served off-site on field trips, that document is right there on the website. Can be downloaded, filled out, and submitted electronically. I've actually seen it's a pretty straightforward.
No, very simple.
Yeah. So.
And I think that maybe Jack's Carol, because Jack is new to the program this year. I think maybe he wants to know, are they reimbursable? And yes, they are, as long as you're serving a full meal to the kids. So yes, and if I prove them to be, served off-site like that, then yes, you can get reimbursement for them. Maybe that was part of what he was asking. Yeah.
That's great. Also, Angelique here is saying that a good way to also run these programs is to try to connect them back to other community resources that are already available. So having information about local food pantry and food kitchens that are available in the community, and having that information available right alongside information about summer. So two ways I think that she's mentioned here is that you can have promotional materials for your summer sites and then information about those community kitchens and pantries, right there on the same document. And then at the summer meal site where the meals are being served, have information about the food pantries and the food kitchens for days when the sites aren't open. Actually, just so everyone knows, the Summer Food Service Program does allow you to serve meals on the weekend as well. It allows you to serve meals through the week and on the weekend. We do know that a lot of our sites are Monday through Friday, and if you're not going to be open in the weekend, that is a great idea. Let folks know what their other options are. Where else in the community can you find these things? Any other questions or concerns here? Nancy, are there any final thoughts that you'd like to share with the group today?
Well, I just wanted to just share, because maybe some people haven't heard me talk about this, but we even have another model, and I'm expecting to maybe see more of this happen. It's happening in other states too, which is a mobile truck. So Green Mountain Farm to School has a truck that is a certified kitchen, and they prepare meals, and they also use local farm, local food to make meals, and they travel the truck around. So they serve different sites on different days. But that's another option. The truck actually becomes a site. It has a canopy and is set up, and it's just an interesting, something to think about if there are any other possibilities. So that in that way, you're taking care of two pieces. You're actually creating the meals in the truck. it becomes the kitchen, and that same vehicle also becomes the site. And that's a problem we have in some of our communities, that there is no activity. There's no site. I've heard of places that they just, there's just nothing going on, and the kids are stuck at home without transportation. So there could be some opportunities to think about. I've heard of people creating sites out of the back of a station wagon and creating, just thinking about how do we reach the kids, bringing another model for bringing a site, for actually creating a site somehow. So, think about it.
That's a great point. And this year, Green Mountain Farm to School, they're providing the meals, and then right there on site, they're going to have nutrition education courses. So they're going to have, activities built around nutrition. They're going to have free meals. So you're right. Effectively bringing that with them is a great idea.
And wouldn't it be cool if we got more kids to farms? I'm just thinking of, where is their food, and where are there other things going on that might really excite kids, but also excite other community partners. I think it is great for farmers to know that they're feeding local kids and feeding kids in schools and feeding kids in summer meals and being in gardens or on farms. Those are great summer activities. So thinking about those connections, I think it's less work if you partner and you find somebody else that's energized to join you.
Yeah, that is so true.
Yeah, we have one more question here. I think we got time for at least one more. A question about what about off-site meals being served? For example, you've got a group of children who are wanting to consume meals, but they're actually not at the summer meal site. Nancy, is it just a head count in that situation, or if meals are
well, the definition of a site is actually where the kids are eating. So it sounds to me like that's even a different site. So the food is going from one location to another, and it can be a different site, and maybe separate meal counts are taking at that location where the kids are eating. So the site is really where the kids are eating. It's not the kitchen.
What would be an example of maybe two nearby spaces that would need to be registered as separate sites? Can you give an example just so everyone can on that?
Maybe you have a really young preschool next in a different building than a regular. I mean, and even that it's kind of iffy. Do you really need to create a separate site? But I mean, that's the first thing that's coming to mind, that there's really a connection between that, but people, that maybe there's different classrooms or they're all registering under one school program, but they're actually divided into different locations. I don't know what the person was.
I have that.
Yeah, okay.
A bit with summer programming in my elementary school. You might have LEAP there, and you might have another school program, and you might have summer school, and they're in different locations. They might want to eat at different times, or some might want to eat in a classroom or some other setting. They might,
or even a different combination of meals. One might have breakfast and lunch, and another might have lunch and after school, mid-afternoon snack or something. So they might even operate on different times. And
that's a good point here. Angelique also mentioned that a group of 5 students that, young children that were too young to walk through the kitchen site, they actually had the meals picked up and they ate at the new site, I'm guessing in a separate classroom. And they just set them up as a closed enrolled site. And so that's a good point. That was a great question that was asked, is, if you've got a separate group of children, even if it's nearby, if it's a separate group of kids that are benefiting from the program, then it makes sense to go ahead and set them up as a different site.
And you have to have count sheets wherever, because the count happens at the point the child receives the meal. So there's also this other benefit that I don't know that everyone would get as excited about as I do, but there's data. When you have your different sites separated out, you can go back and historically see what were our numbers like. You have a little more information, too. So you would probably have in different locations different count sheets, and then those could be directly put in if there's a different site agreement on the website into their own little claim, and then they have your own set of numbers that you can later analyze if you want.
That's great. And so just to kind of be clear with regard to the question, it sounds like, Nancy, you're saying, if you've got, even if they're nearby, if you've got two distinct groups of kids that are benefiting from the meal programs in different places, they just need to get registered as a separate site.
I think so. I think that's a good idea, and we have, lots of different flavors of things, so we would talk it through. I don't know if there's a reason why they wouldn't want to do that, but that's typically what happens.
Okay, great. Steve, any final thoughts? And once again, let me just thank both of you, to Nancy and to Steve, for joining me today. This has been, Nancy, I appreciate you calling in, and then Steve for coming in. This has been really a lot of fun. Do you have any thoughts?
No, I just thank everybody who's out there for providing summer meals. It's such a great program. I truly love being part of summer meals, and that my information is there, so if anyone has questions as they're moving forward. And I want to thank Nancy. She's done a great job managing the summer program for the Agency of Education. So there again, she is a great resource, and Derek has done a great job as well. So there are a lot of great resources out there as you continue on.
And so you see these names here on the screen. If you have any further questions, I feel like all three, feel free to write or call. Share your questions and concerns. Once again, Nancy, thanks for calling in. To all of you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thanks to everyone else who called in today, and for your time and your thoughts, especially those of you who wrote in with your thoughts and questions. Have a nice day, and we look forward to being in touch.